Hello, my ghouls and goblins. Welcome back to Bybookandbone, or if you're new here, welcome. So for this video, I'm going to talk about a very popular book, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. So as I said, this is a very, very popular book. You've probably heard of it, but just in case, I'm going to do a non-spoiler review section, and then I'm going to go into the spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, if you haven't read it yet, I'll have it broken up so you can listen to the first part and maybe then go to the ending. The reason I'm saying maybe go to the ending is I'm also going to talk about some odd reviews I saw for Where the Crawdads Sing, and I think I've seen these kind of strange reviews a few times for different books, and I was just kind of wondering. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to see what other people thought. Is it just me? Is it strange? And I'm not talking about just bad reviews or good reviews, people who hated the book or loved the book. Like, anybody can hate or love anything. I'm not complaining about that or anything. It's just strange kind of takes that I just wanted to talk about. So without further ado, Where the Crawdads Sing is a literary fiction novel that follows Kaya Clark, who is this marsh girl. She's almost a rumour of a person who lives in the 1950s in Barclay Cove. So it's this quiet fishing village, and they judge her to be essentially white trash. You know, she lives in a shack. She's completely alone from about the age of 11. So her mom and brothers and sisters abandon her and her father when she's 6. And this is because her father is abusive and alcoholic. She's dealing with how to live with him, and then how to, feed herself, how to clothe herself, how to, live. And she's very, very frightened of the townsfolk because, they're cruel and they judge her as white trash. So the book kind of starts off this way, but it also is intertwined with 1969, where a local, Chase Andrews, is found dead, and the other locals suspect her because she's another. It's kind of mostly told linearly. The timeline is like from her early life going through until her 20s and such, but there is that occasional glimpse into the case that's happening in 1969. So this isn't the book that I kind of thought it was. I don't know. I put it off for a long time. Like, I knew the first part that it was about this kind of marsh girl and that there was a murder mystery. But I don't know. I didn't read the full synopsis or full blurb, which I really should have, because it's actually about a naturalist and how she comes into science. How she is completely, her entire life is intertwined with the marsh. Like, she relies on the marsh. She's learning about it. She knows more than anybody else. She is the expert, and not just from a living there aspect. It is from a scientific and biological aspect as well. So it's really, really interesting from that sort of thing. This is it is a very slow story. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't like slow literary fiction where there's a lot of descriptions about the marsh and the birds and the insects and plants, like, I loved all that. There's descriptions about the rags and clothes that she's wearing. It's her daily life a lot of the time, which, it's not like especially in the beginning, it's not like she's doing amazingly interesting, like, I suppose that's not unfair to say, but it is interesting to me, but it's definitely, if you don't like slow descriptive books, you mightn't like Where the Crawdads Sing. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 on the story graph and 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. Like, I really love this book. I love it. There are some flaws, I would say. One of the big ones is actually the kind of timeline jumps. Like, I don't really understand why they bother going back and forth between, because it's so rare that you go back to 1969 to see the case, and the case isn't particularly interesting because it's just the same sort of detail oriented description of incompetent police wandering around just talking to people, but you're already, like, everything that they'd say, you're already informed of because you've read it from Kaya's perspective. So when they're like, "Oh, she knew Chase Andrews," and all this kind of crap, like you know that, like everybody knows everybody. It's I don't know why it didn't just go, like why it wasn't written from her early life to the mystery. And I think that's all I can say without really ruining it much. Like, while this is a literary fiction, it very much has a sort of, it's odd to say, but it almost has like a gothic fiction writing style, which I loved. It's very much a coming of age in the Bildungsroman way, which is a Bildungsroman is a specific type of coming of age story. I hope I'm saying it correctly, but it's one of my favorite ones where it's about like a naive person getting the answers to life, and it's usually a little bit darker, I find. What's a good example of one? Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is like the perfect example of Bildungsroman, the coming of age sort of thing. So that's why I kind of get this gothic fiction feel of Where the Crawdads Sing. And for those of you that know me, that is like right up my alley. So I do very much recommend this. But if you don't like slow stories, if you don't like coming of age stories, you mightn't like this. So skip the next section if you don't want to be spoiled, because I am absolutely going to go into quite a few things, especially like the romance. I'm going to completely ruin the ending. Okay, now for the spoilers. As I said, I did really enjoy Where the Crawdads Sing, and I mentioned the flaw with the timeline, but now I'm kind of maybe going to mention the ending as a flaw, like the very ending. There is a courtroom kind of drama in this, which I will have to say is the weakest part of the story for me, just because you're still, that part of it is now back to being from Kaya Clark's perspective, instead of, like, occasionally there was the timeline jump, which was from the sheriff's perspective, essentially. But you're back to Kaya's perspective, and she has a very inward focused sort of person, and this is like a third person book, so when she's so inward focused, you don't get a lot from the court case. But there's also, I kind of got the sense that it was trying to be a sort of How to Kill a Mockingbird thing, except obviously Kaya is white. She deals with kind of xenophobia from, like, or prejudice from a different perspective. So it was just kind of a strange thing, and they also, that was a bit strange. I don't think the court case was written very well because they had no evidence that she did it, which obviously it's 1969, so that doesn't mean anything. I mean, even modern days, that really doesn't mean anything, but it's definitely kind of frustrating to read because you're like, well, she didn't do it. Or, like, but then in the ending, it turns out she did do it. Kaya killed Chase Andrews, and she did it in a cold blood way. I mean, he's a piece of, crap. Like, he tries to sexually assault her, and it's disgusting and awful. And he was a shit boyfriend who took advantage of a naive woman. And it's, like, I'm not saying, like, I can't say, like, he deserved to die, because he could, he deserved to be in prison. But she, to have pulled it off, she had to, like, plan it in advance and meticulously plan it and carry out this murder. And you only find out in, like, the last few pages. Like, I listened to the audiobook, which I definitely recommend. It's very, very good. But then it's like through a poem that her husband finds after her death. It's like, oh yeah, no, she did it, and then he's like, oh fuck, and then just burns all the evidence, and it's kind of like, what? Like, that's the ending. And I think it should have just ended when she died, because she dies in a kind of, like, she dies young enough, in her 60s, but it's in her boat, and she just lies down, and it's in the marsh among, like, the birds and the insects that she loved, and she just quietly passes away. And I think it should have just ended. Like, that was perfect. And you didn't, like, I don't think you should know who killed Chase Andrews, in a sort of maybe she did, maybe she didn't way. It's not like she was, it's cold-blooded murder, but at the same time, you could also see it as herself protecting herself, because he might have tried to sexually assault her again. It was just, I don't know how others feel about that ending. I'd love to know, like, in the comments below, like, did you love the ending? Did you like that it was confirmed um, that she did kill him? I don't know. I like the rest of the story, like before the court case, was fantastic. Like, like how she's abandoned by her mother, like how all her brothers and sisters, but like this 6-year-old girl in a shack with her abusive alcoholic father, and nobody took her. This girl who, like, they might as well have just left her to die. And then she's to try deal with her, learn how to, like, navigate having an alcoholic, violent father, and the fact that he's drinking all the money, essentially. And she finds that he got better kind of after everybody left. Like, it's strange. There was a lot of time where he wasn't as like, when I say better, I don't mean good, where he's not as abusive, and they kind of live together in a kind of, in a, not like a very, very unstable harmony. But then he disappears. Presumably he dies. He, like, must drink himself into and fall into a hole or something. And how old was she? She was still very young. She must have been like 11 when he disappeared, maybe younger. And so she has to, like, all the money that he did bring in is gone. So now she has to learn how to survive. Like, she lives off the marshland, either by directly eating the food she's able to gather, or selling it in town to Jumpin. And then Jumpin and his wife Mabel, who are lovely characters, and I think pretty well done characters, they try to help her, but also, like make it quiet, because they're black, and at the time that in the 50s in America, they have to, like, be quite quiet about it. So they were like, oh, this family wanted to buy this stuff off you, but there actually nobody did. It's just that it was, people gave it to her out of kindness, but she couldn't know that, so they kind of bartered for it in a sort of way. I really enjoyed, like, how Tate is one of the romances, and I loved him. He's, you might say it's like a little bit too perfect, that he's just a little bit too good, but, like, he fecks up in the middle, but so, I suppose that kind of does it. But he helps teach her to read. Like, the book says, like, oh, he taught her to read completely, but realistically he gave her the tools to learn herself more than anything. And she starts reading everything her mom left behind. And her mom was an artist, so she is able to she has some paints, and she obviously would have watched her mom, so she has that basis. Like, everything that she learns to do, there is a basis for. So she learns to paint, and because she loves the marsh, like, her and Tate swap feathers as gifts for each other, and shells, and she starts painting the feathers and the shells and the animals, and it's not like she's a TV or anything else. As long as she has her food, she spends, like, basically the rest of the time exploring the marsh and painting and writing. And she becomes this naturalist. Like, she starts identifying the exact species everything is and writing it in. So there's a basis for it, and as it goes on, by the end, she's this well-known local expert who has books with her, all the species in them. Like, she's like a shell book, and like a crustacean book, and then she's the bird book, and she's all her own illustrations, but she still lives this completely, like, hermit life in the marsh. And it's, I loved all that. And I know I'm just gonna keep going and keep talking about how amazing it is, and so I'm gonna stop now and just say, there was a few downsides. I thought the court case was weak, and the timeline jumping just didn't make much sense. But other than that, the book is pretty great, start to finish. Oh, the ending, the very ending. I mean, when I say ending, I mean the last page. I'm just, ugh. So I definitely recommend it. And now I just want to talk just a little bit about odd takes in books. And I think these kind of strange takes or strange reviews come from when people don't like a popular book, or any book really, but they feel the need to justify it, so they have to come up with, like, oh, it's not solid reasons for disliking it. But, like, just dislike a book. There's, like, even though I really like Where the Crawdads Sing, I think there's perfectly good reasons to dislike it. Um, However, I saw a few particularly negative reviews of Where the Crawdads Sing that I found to be strange. Like most of the reviews were like, "Oh, I just didn't like it. There was like it's too the genre hopping is too much. They didn't like the timeline thing. They didn't like the very slow this how slow the book was, which is like completely fair enough. But there was one review I remember that loads of people loved that was talking about how much of a Mary Sue Kaya was, and they had a really strange take as well on the black characters that were in the book. And I was like, I think part of it is because I'm not American, so I don't know the trope that they're describing. And I'm not going to say it because I literally I don't know if it's offensive or not, so I just they had an odd take about that. But the one that I did understand that confused me was they called Kaya Mary Sue. And now I do think that discussing a character as a Mary Sue is valid. Like I've used that term myself, but it's just a really strange, almost like I don't know, like a shock to see a literary fiction have a character be described as a Mary Sue, because it's more of a like fantasy or superhero sort of thing. And it was really, I was kind of like, oh, okay. But their main thing was they were like, oh, she's amazing at everything, and everybody loves her and all this. And it was so weird to me because no, they don't. Most people dislike her. Like the whole book was about people being prejudiced against her because she lived in the marsh in a shack, and they blamed her for things that weren't her fault. They wouldn't let their kids talk to her. Like she went to school for one day and was bullied so badly she never went back. And it's like, okay. And then everything that she did learn, everything she did learn, as I said in the spoiler section, I was like, is built into the story. Like it's not like she just learnt it out of nowhere. I can't help but feel like calling a character like that Mary Sue, like you can't believe that somebody who didn't go to school or somebody who in doesn't fit your idea of somebody that's educated or intelligent, like they could never do what Kaya did and become a naturalist or publish a book, or and it was just it's difficult for me to kind of put into words because I don't want to like fall back on the sexism thing because I don't know if it is, like I don't know if this person and all the others that agreed with them, I wouldn't know that a lot of them were women that thought this the character was a Mary Sue. But I couldn't help but feel like it was so like that these people were doing the exact thing that the villagers were doing, like, oh, you useless crazy girl, she could never amount to anything. It's like, oh, they're a Mary Sue because they had a hard start in life and then they didn't stay uneducated, illiterate in their place or something. I don't know. But it was just an odd take, and it's not the only time I've seen something like that where people will be like, oh, this character is like a Mary Sue, or oh, this character is the male gaze about this character, when it doesn't quite fit. Like, I'm not saying any of those things aren't valid in a lot of cases. It's just that I find it odd when people feel like they have to put these kind of buzzwords somewhere, like that I don't like. I don't know how you could read it and come to that conclusion like that, especially like it's so strange to me. It's like, oh, and all the guys like her. It was like two guys liked her and one of them only liked her as a conquest. It's like, it was kind of strange. But I'd love to know what you think about that. Have you seen that in with this case where the Crawdads Sing? Do you think she's a Mary Sue? Do you think I'm completely wrong? And especially if you can explain why, like love to have that discussion. But also, have you seen this sort of thing with other books, whether they're popular books, whether they're not popular books, whether the kind of strange review or take you saw was positive or negative? Because I've seen strange positive takes as well. Like one was for the vegetarian. I can't quite remember what the take was, but I remember being like, how did you read that book and come to that conclusion? you know? So I'd really love to know what you think. Please leave your comments down below. Thanks so much for watching this far. This video is a bit longer than normal, so if you're here, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I'm thinking I might do an every second week post because I'm very, very busy in real life. So I might do some shorts as well to kind of get the content out there to still talk to you and have interactions. But I do have a plan for a series, but it's taking a lot more to put together, which is why I'm going to maybe have a few like more off the cuff sort of videos like this one where there's not really any scripting. Or I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned. There will be a series coming and I think you'll enjoy it.